So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am BK. I'm the director of the Pennsylvania Park Maintenance Institute, and spring has sprung, at least in most parts of the country, and it's time for our plants to wake up. So in this edition of Shop Talk, we've invited Jeff Fowler back to talk about spring sport field maintenance. Jeff will also discuss what should be done throughout the summer to ensure our playing surface maintains safety and are ready for fall sports as well. So our learning objectives for today are to learn about spring field preparation techniques. We're going to learn about agronomic practices for fall sport fields and review field care processes throughout the spring season into the summer. So Jeff is the senior extension educator of the horticulture, specializing in turf management for Penn State Extension. He's been working for Penn State since 1988. He earned his Bachelor's of Science from Delaware Valley College, and he has his master's degree from Penn State University. In 2006, Jeff was honored by the Sports Turf Managers Association, or STMA, with the Dr. William H. Daniel Founders Award for his excellence and dedication to research and teaching. And in 2019, he was presented with the Harry C. Gill Memorial Award, which is the highest honor the association presents for his commitment and dedication to STMA. Additionally, in 2019, Jeff was presented with the Fowler's Founders Award from the Keystone Athletic Field Managers Association, or CAFMO, here in Pennsylvania, in recognition of his unselfish commitment to excellence in education, athletic field management, and professionalism for Pennsylvania sports turf industry. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Jeff.
Thanks, BK. That's more of an introduction than I've received in the last 31 years. And you don't have to believe anything he just said, because most of it's not true. What I learned in 2019 is if you kick cancer's butt, they give you a trophy. I was actually given the Fowler Founders and the STMA Harry Gill Award. But the biggest news of 2018 into 2019 was when my oncologist told me I was clean. So they didn't actually give me something to show people other than this right here in front of you. So that's about as good as it gets. And I apologize for the quality of that trophy. It just, it's the way it works. So since we have such a small, intimate group today, what I'm going to suggest is if you have questions to fire them at me throughout the day, or type them into the chat pod, but let's not wait till the end. Just throw them at me as things come up in my presentation or in my slides. And I would love, because we don't do this enough, in my opinion, I would love for you to turn on your cameras and unmute yourself and talk to me like we're standing across the room from each other. Thank you, Lynn. You win that prize. But we over the last 365 days, I think we've lost a lot of connections because we don't see people's faces anymore. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine. I know what some of you look like, and like Judy, for example, should turn her camera on, and BK should turn his off. If you know what I'm saying.
Thanks,
Anyway, so BK asked me to talk about some grass and some lawn care. So I have a little bit of a presentation here for you, but we can deviate into anything that you want to talk about. And my title for today is Doesn't Grass Just Grow by Itself? And indeed, it does grow by itself, but it doesn't grow near as well as we can make it grow, and near as well as we need it to as well as we need it to perform on our athletic fields when they're under pressure and under constant use. Now, so this is a little bit different year than any of you have ever had, because we did not get the wear and tear on our athletic fields last summer that we typically get over the course of the year, right? I mean, how many of us actually had games on our fields last year at this time? Most of us were sitting at home with wondering if we were going to have jobs. Wondering if we were going to survive, whether we were going to get whether we were going to get the virus and have a ventilator. We didn't know, right? None of us knew. But what we did recognize is the fact that we didn't have near as much play on our fields as we typically do over the course of the spring and summer. So I said, and I challenged some people to get out there and do the things that they've always said that they want. Well, if we didn't have as much play, I would do this. Or if we didn't have those kids out there running on our fields, I would do this. And I got called to the principal's office, so to speak, from a couple of good friends over in the Toledo area. They said, yeah, we would love to do that, Jeff, but our bosses, our managers are telling us not to do anything because we don't know how much money we're going to have. We didn't know what our budgets looked like. So I was saying, get out there and do all the things that you've said you've wanted to do for years and years and years. And they called my bluff and said, hey, look, we would love to, Jeff, but we don't know if we're going to be able to buy fertilizer and seed, whether we should aerate, because we don't know if we're going to be here to do things or whether we're going to have to stay home and let our grass grow to 3 feet tall. Now, fortunately, I guess many of us were deemed essential workers after a long period of time where we could actually get out and mow and do some things like that, because when the pandemic first started, we weren't sure whether we were going to be considered essential workers. We had golf courses that were, afraid that they weren't going to be able to mow grass. And then we did finally declare them essential workers, and they were at least able to do the basic management. So anyway, enough about what has happened to us over the course of the last year. Let's talk about what we should be doing looking forward into the next year. So I don't know whether you guys know it or not, but there is a town, while I work for Penn State, there is a town in Pennsylvania by the name of Academia. So everybody always said, oh, this guy's just going to be from academia and it's just going to be that same old same. Well, be assured that my presentation over the next hour will be just about 2 miles away from academia. It'll be based on the findings that we have, but it's not going to be your typical college professor sitting and talking to you over the next hour. So let's start with the most basic of all basics. And it's one that I always start with, and that is getting our soil's blood pressure taken, and that is a soil test. If you take nothing else away from what I say today, please just take the value of a soil test and take it for, don't take it for granted, and go out and soil test and get your results. And base your fertility program on the results of that soil test. We could be done right there. And if you learn that one thing today, I become a happy instructor, because it is by far the most important thing we do over the course of the life of our fields and over the life of our careers, really. Because if we don't take a soil test, right, we're just throwing things at our grass that we don't even know whether the grass needs, right? So it's like taking us as a human and throwing us into a vat of liver and onions. If we don't like liver and onions, right, being around all that food doesn't do anything for us, as opposed to throwing us into a great big chocolate cake, right? which we would all, I think most of us would probably like. It may not be good for us, but we would like it. But my point is, we don't want to waste money, especially in the arena that you guys and ladies come from, and that's Parks and Recs, where we're on very limited budgets, as opposed to the Pirates or the Phillies or the Steelers or the Eagles, or quite honestly, even Beaver Stadium at Penn State, where budgets aren't necessarily confined, right? If they need a pallet of grass seed for Heinz Field in Pittsburgh, that's a pretty cheap investment when you're paying athletes millions and millions of dollars. Most of us on this presentation today would kill for a pallet of grass seed, right? They go through 6 of them in Pittsburgh every year in the Steelers. 6 pallets of seed every year on 1 2-acre field. One field, 6 pallets. So anyway, so we don't want to waste our resources. So we want to take a soil test and make sure that we get the results back, and we base our soil test or our plants needs based on the results of the soil test. And this is fuzzy and foggy because it's an actual soil test, but basically the results come back and it tells you the optimum pH, and it tells you phosphorus and potassium needs. So and then below that, right in this area, it tells us how much lime to apply, how much nitrogen, how much phosphorus, and how much potassium that we need to put on, in this instance, per 1,000 square feet, because this was a home lawn, to bring our plants. That's to kind of fill the buffet table for the plants to eat at. So picture it, if you will, as your favorite buffet. Without doing a soil test, it's like having all the nutrients. If the pH is off, or something like that, it's like filling up something that nobody likes, or they can't eat. So,
is there an ideal time of year to do those soil tests?
The only time you shouldn't be doing soil tests is on Christmas Day, because you should be spending that day with your family. Every other day any other day of the year that you can get a shovel or a soil probe into the soil is a good day to soil test. Okay, so then once we get the soil test back, then we need to pay attention to what it's telling us, and when we put the lime and fertilizer on that we need to apply to fill up that buffet for the plants to utilize. And one of the questions that I always get about lime, and it's inevitable that I'll get this call, is what's the best kind of lime to use? And quite honestly, the answer to that is whatever lime you can get your hands on at a reasonable cost. But there are some stipulations, and it's really about ground, granular, or pelletized lime, right? And really, it's a personal preference. Ground is the finest, which means it will react the quickest and change the pH the quickest. Granular is a little bit larger particle. It'll change the pH, but it's just going to take a little longer for it to do that. And pelletized is the largest of the chunk of lime, the easiest to spread, but it's made up of ground lime that's been pelletized, so it's easier to spread. And here's a graph that I want to show you, and that is some research that we did and a demonstration that we did. The pH was 5 when we started, and it was over a 12-month period. And you can see this actually shifted down when it got put into PowerPoint this morning. And I apologize. The 20 to 30 mesh is the red line. The blue line is the 40 to 50 mesh, and the green line is the 60 to 80 mesh line. Okay, so that's the finest particle. You can see that the finest particle lime, the green line, changed the pH over the same 12-month period. It changed it considerably more than did the larger particle red line, the 20 to 30 mesh. Considerably more. Over the course of the same time, Okay, it changed the 20 to 30 mesh lime, changed it from 5 to about 5.3. And over that same year, the 60 to 80 mesh lime changed it from 5 up to almost 6.4. Okay, so again, if we're going to make the investment, let's make a wise investment, right? And do it in a lime that's going to change the pH quickly. And the reason we want to change the lime to maximize it, our turf grasses, our cool season turf grasses, like a pH between 6.5 and 6.8. Okay, that's the window that our cool season grasses like to grow. Yeah, some of them will like a little bit lower, some of them will do a little better if it's a little higher, but for the most part, 6.5 to 6.8. And here's why they like 6.5 to 6.8. If you look at this chart, it's all the micro and macronutrients that a plant needs to grow, whether it's turf or whether it's spaghetti squash. It's the same chart, right? And that's the availability of these nutrients. So if you look between 6.5 and 7, okay, you will look down across that chart and see that a majority of the macros, the N, P, and K, those are the macronutrients, are most readily available, as are the micronutrients, other than iron. Iron prefers a little less pH, but nonetheless, the rest of them are at their maximum level of availability between 6.5 and 6.8. Okay, so it's not rocket science that we sit in front of you and say pH between 6.5 and 6.8. That's when the buffet table is fullest for those plants to grow. Okay, when the pH isn't right, so say the pH is 6. Okay, so if you look at the chart, you can see that the nutrients there. So it doesn't mean that the nutrients aren't available or aren't in the soil. It just means that they're not available for the plant to uptake. Okay, so they're there, but the plant can't utilize them. Okay, so that's where that's when the buffet table, they put those little plastic lids on and protect the food that you can't get the fork or the tongs into, right? That's what happens if the pH is too high or too low, is basically the soil puts those little plastic lids on and the plant can't get to the food. Okay, so if anybody ever tells you that nutrients aren't good for grass, remember this picture always. Okay, this is in a sulfur hot spring in Yellowstone National Park. Okay, you can see the only green grass, this is like a pH of like 1 over here. But a buffalo had gone through and done his business right here in the middle of this, and it's the only place that there is grass growing. Okay, so nutrients are good for grass, and don't ever, so if meeting those soil test results is invaluable to us as turf managers. And don't be a knucklehead and be this person who knows that nutrients are good, but God only knows what they were doing when they were making an application. I can't tell whether it's over-applicated or under-applicated. I believe it to be over-applicated in the brown areas, that they doubled up or whatever they did, who knows. So don't be this person and make an application like this. If we're going to take the time and make an application of nutrients, we don't want to dump it all in one place, and we sure don't want to do this to our yard. Make sure we do a nice even application. So spring is also the time that we turn out the mowers, right? It's inevitable that we're going to have to get the lawn mowers out once the soil temperatures start to increase, because that stimulates the roots to go upward. So just a reminder that we never want to take more than 1/3 of the green growth in one mowing. Okay, so for example, if our turf is 3 inches tall, okay, we never want to mow it lower than 2 inches in one mowing. Okay, because it's not healthy for the grass. We know that the green growth is directly reflected by the root, or the amount of green growth is directly correlated to the amount of root growth underneath the plant, almost directly. So if our green growth is 3 inches tall, we know that our root mass is just about 3 inches deep. Okay, and vice versa. If we're at a half inch, like we are on a putting green on the golf course, we know that our root mass is only about a half inch deep. Okay, so never more than a third of the green growth in one mowing. So you may be sitting there going, I can't do that. I can't mow only 1/3. I only mow once a week, and I can't afford to mow more than that. I can get myself in trouble here, but I'm going to say it again anyway, and that is the single biggest practice short of fertilizer that you can make or do to your fields or grass areas to improve the quality of them. The single practice is 1 additional mowing a week. Okay, research done at Michigan State. The single way to improve the quality of your grass is by mowing once a week, one time additional a week. So if you're mowing once, mow twice. If you're mowing twice, mow 3 times. It improves the quality of grass because we're reducing the amount of that green vegetation that we're taking off during mowing. And it's incredible that is a single practice. So you may say, well, Jeff, I don't have the mowing equipment to do something like that. Well, then I will challenge you to look at your budgets and look at your equipment and start to move yourself towards that as a goal, right? So maybe it means getting some sort of a different mower that allows you to mow 1 additional time a week. And I'll give you an example. The school district that my wife and I just moved from, inevitably every other year, they would buy 4 or 5 zero-turn lawn mowers from a vendor. Now, I won't tell you what vendor it was because it doesn't matter. But they would get 4 or 5 new zero-turns, and they would pay students $12 an hour to mow grass. And they would put them on these zero-turn mowers, and they couldn't stay ahead of it. I mean, it was a 100-acre campus, 100 acres of grass, and they couldn't stay ahead of it. And finally, I said to the maintenance, the head of maintenance, I said, Tim, why don't you invest in a big 8-foot wide lawnmower and mow this place right? He said, well, that's a $60,000 mower. We can't afford that. I said, all right, let's do the math on this a minute, Tim. I'm not that bright, but if we're spending $10,000 on zero-turn mowers every other year and we're buying 4 of them, we'll just do 4. That's $40,000 over the course of 4 years. You could have paid for a more upscale mower that would mow higher quality and more width at one time, and you'd have only had to have paid one kid $12 an hour to mow as opposed to 4. And all of a sudden the lights kind of came on as if to say, oh, I never thought about it that way. Well, it's a lawnmower. It's going to have to sit during the summer. So we need something that we can put a snow removal. Okay, well, buy a plow for on the front of it, or a brush or a blower or something. But be able to mow your grass 1 additional time a week will be the single thing that you can do to improve the quality of it. Enough of my preaching. So the other thing that we should be doing in spring is aerification of our fall sports fields. Okay, so fields that are going to be under pressure with football, with soccer in the fall. And I know Parks and Recs is a little bit different because we have soccer all year round. We have baseball all year round, but we have to find that window that we can do aerification. And quite honestly, we're going to make less people upset if we get this done now, as opposed to waiting to the middle of football season when they're beating that up. So getting out there and aerifying, and this chart is not one that you need to write all this stuff down. Here's what it's all about. This chart reminds me to tell you that going over your field one time with a aerator or aerator that looks like this isn't even close to enough. Okay, we should be removing 35 3/4-inch holes annually per square foot. Again, I'm not real bright. I wasn't that good in math. Just had to ask my math teacher from high school and college. I actually am almost still a college student because of math. But 35 3/4-inch holes a year annually. That means that with this aerator or this aerator, okay, we are going, this is 6-inch centers. Okay, that means we're going to go over our fields a total of 8 times with that aerator in the course of a year to remove enough of the mass of the soil to relieve compaction. Okay, that doesn't, going over it once with this aerator is like tickling it. Okay, we have to get serious with I always tell people that run aerators like this, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. This is what I use on our local little league fields and our local high school baseball field. This is the exact instrument that I use. There's nothing wrong with it. Good heavy pulls, a good solid core. But your goal when using this aerator should be for the coaches to be complaining to you because you looks like you rototilled the field. That's how much soil we're going to remove. Okay, 35 3/4-inch holes a year.
And to clarify, that's pulling plugs, not just using the tines, correct?
Yeah. So this one is pulling plugs. If you look behind it, it's pulling cores. Not the solid tine. Solid tines are great for a good gas exchange to allow CO2 out of the soil and exchange it with O2 so the roots can grow. But that's 35 3/4-inch cores per year is what we need to get up and get out of there. Now, if we're using a hydraulically driven aerator, that's one pass. Okay, it's taking enough cores because it's probably on 2-inch centers or 3-inch centers as opposed to 6 inches on square. Okay, so we talked about the root growth and shoot growth over the course of the year and over the mowing height. This is just a picture that shows the correlation between the green growth and the root growth, and you can see this is late winter, and then it moves into early spring. Our roots during the cool season, this time of the year, we've got good deep roots. Our goal as turf managers is to have this out here, where we typically don't get that kind of root growth. And we do that by aerating, by irrigation, with water, with fertilizer and lime, and stimulating roots to go downward and keep them down deep. Okay, the other thing that we need to talk about in the spring, if you haven't already, your coaches are probably absolutely driving you nuts, wanting to get on baseball fields or softball fields if they're not already on. This has been a great spring. Spring has been dry, at least in my part of the world. Spring has been dry. Spring came early. Warm temperatures came early. We're pushing buds. I'm looking out the window at the maple tree in my front yard. We're pushing red buds on on maple trees. We're about a week and a half early compared to normal. Okay, which means also our annual grasses are going to be about a week early. So goosegrass, crabgrass, those annual grasses are going to start germinating. So we need to get those applications out as well. Now, we also need to get our playing surfaces taken care of. This is a softball field, believe it or not. You can see the mound right here, which is scary to me that they let it get like this. But wintertime came and went, and you can see some jackass over here on the right-hand corner drove across the field and left tracks going out across the mud. You can see that the same person probably got stuck right here. That's why we have fences, right? Even if it's just a piece of snow fence to put up and stop people from doing that. But we need to get them back into shape. We even need to get rid of the low spots to stop the puddles from forming. Every summer field day I go to, I always get asked, Jeff, can you show us how to get rid of a puddle? And my reply always is, if you brought me here to do that, you brought me here for the entirely wrong reason, because I don't know how to get rid of a puddle. I know how to prevent puddles. And preventing puddles is the way we need to look at this, and that is to keep our playing surfaces so that water sheds off the back of them. That may include leveling or rolling, continually working the infield mixes, the skin surfaces, the dirt areas, if you will, continuing to work them so that water will flow off as opposed to flowing through. Water flows through most infield mixes at about a 0.0025 inches per hour rate. Okay, that's a really, really slow rate for water to soak through or to drain through an infield mix. What we need to rely on is the crowning and the grading for water to get off of the surface. So we get that area done, and then we roll it tight, and that way when it rains, the water rolls off to the edges and gets into the turf areas, as opposed to laying on the skin like this photo shows, where the water is standing, or where the water is standing. Okay. So then we're going to spend a little time talking about the 4 different cool season grasses: bluegrass, ryegrass, fine fescue, and tall fescue. But I want to take a break for just a split second and ask if there are any questions about what we just talked about before we get to the 4 cool season grasses.
Again, folks can feel free to unmute themselves if they have any. There's nothing in the chat box currently, Jeff.
All right, well, then let's roll into the 4 primary cool season grasses. And I like to talk about these because I think many times we waste money buying cheap grass seed or inappropriate grass seed for the area that we want to plant it in and have it do well. I'll use as an example the city park in the town that my office is in. I've been working for Penn State for almost 33 years. So for the last, I started when I was 5, I know. For the last 32 years, they have been calling my office and wanting to know how to get grass to grow in the city park. Okay, and the city park is very well used, and the city park is used for an event at the beginning of October every year that brings hundreds of thousands of people to the town. I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of thousands of people brought into the town to a craft show. And that craft show covers every square inch of the city park. And inevitably on Thursday before that craft show starts, it rains. And they beat this poor park up. Even if it doesn't rain, you can imagine 100,000 people, there's sidewalks, but they put the craft tents about 2 feet back from the sidewalk. And I'm like, why have a sidewalk if you're going to put the 2 feet back? And then that 2-foot strip right next to it just absolutely gets punished. And the second week of October, the city park manager calls me. He's like, Jeff, we can't get grass to grow in the park. Yeah, well, no kidding. You haven't been able to get it to grow for 33 years. Why do you think it's going to be different this year? But there are some things that they can do, and I have tried to help them do, and they always tell me they don't have time. And my answer always is, that's fine if you don't have time, but then you're going to have to live with the results of what you have, right? So anyway, part of it is that they're using the wrong variety of grass. They're going to the local hardware store and buying the cheapest grass they can buy. Okay, and with grass seed, you get what you pay for. If you're going to buy 99 cents a pound grass seed, you're going to get 99 cents a pound grass. Bottom line. So let's talk about these 4 different varieties of grass a little bit and see what if I can get my computer to work. There we go. Bluegrass. So bluegrass is the grass of choice for most athletic fields. Okay, so if we had our druthers, we would have a 100% bluegrass football soccer field if we had our choices. And the reason it would be our choice is because of the way bluegrass grows. If we put down one seed, if we took a 2x2 square foot of topsoil and put it in the middle of my office here, okay, and we threw one seed into that 2x2 square and put water on it and planted it and had the right fertilizer, eventually that one seed would fill in that whole 2x2 area. Okay, it grows by rhizomes and stolons. Rhizomes are above ground. I'm sorry, stolons are above ground, rhizomes are below ground. You can see this is one plant right here. Okay, and you can see it grows, and then it's got a younger plant coming off of it here growing, and then there's another younger one coming here, and here comes another little one right up through here that's eventually going to make a plant. So one plant eventually will fill in a 2x2 square. Now, to grow into that 2x2 area, we're going to wait for a while, but it eventually would do it, okay, just by the nature of the way it grows, okay? Bluegrass is one that spreads by rhizomes, and we do need to periodically thatch. Most of these cool season grasses like to be mowed between 2 and 2.5 inches, and they can take 3 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year. Okay, when it is hot and dry, bluegrass will go dormant, but it spreads by rhizomes, and that's the Little League World Series complex. The field there is 100% bluegrass, and it grows into itself. Now, it has been updated since this picture was taken, but it continues to thrive under heavy use and heavy play. So if you will allow me to go back here, if we had a football field that's 100% bluegrass and we pop a divot right here, okay, right here, and we take that plant out, right, these other plants are going to grow in there within a course of time. Okay? Within a week or so, those other plants are going to fill in that other, and it's going to be a lot better than one that we throw down one seed, one plant. But bluegrass is susceptible to rusted leaf spot, but they all have their drawbacks. Perennial ryegrass is not rhizomatous. It's not rhizomatous by nature. So unlike bluegrass, right? If we take that 2x2 square, we throw down one seed, we're going to get one plant. Okay. Now, in the last 10 years, there have been some developments in making ryegrass rhizomatous. Okay. So That's a big word for basically saying for shooting for spreading by rhizomes. Okay. I don't want to say that it doesn't happen. Rhizomatous ryegrass does exist, but it does not exist to the extent that is the Kentucky bluegrass. Okay, we can throw down one seed and get one plant. The rhizomatous, we may throw down one seed and we may get a clump, a little bit bigger clump than one seed. But if we throw down one seed of ryegrass in that 2x2 square, even if it's rhizomatous, it's going to take forever to fill in that 2x2 square. So I won't say that it doesn't exist, but 99% of the time, even when it is rhizomatous ryegrass, it's not spreading like bluegrass is. Okay, so perennial ryegrass is excellent for overseeding thinning turf or damaged turf, right? So soccer goal mouths, lacrosse goal mouths, or I'm sorry, lacrosse creases, and between the hash marks of a football field, on the sidelines of anything, where we need quick, instant growth. Okay, perennial ryegrass. If the conditions are right, we throw down one seed, and it has water and nutrients and soil, it'll be up in 4 days. If it has a 7-day window, it will do extremely well with just 7 days from the time you put it down to the time you expect it to perform. Bluegrass, on the other hand, we're looking at 21 days till it even breaks through its shell. Even if it's pre-germinated and soaked in water and all those things, it's still going to take a few days for it to do its thing, but basically 21 days if you just throw it down. So we love ryegrass for those thinning damaged turf areas. It does not have the thatch layer that perennial ryegrass does, or I'm sorry, that bluegrass has. Perennial ryegrass grows more upright as opposed to the Kentucky bluegrass that spreads by rhizomes and kind of makes a thatch layer. So we have to go in to 100% Kentucky bluegrass and remove this thatch layer every other year or every third year. But we have to pay attention to that as opposed to the perennial ryegrass where our soil and growth point meet. Okay. It is gray leaf spot susceptible. There are gray leaf spot resistant varieties of perennial ryegrass, but that is the one drawback to rye. But everything, like I said, has drawbacks to it. Fine fescue. Let me just check time here. Yeah. So fine fescue, about the same thing. It grows very, very well in shaded areas. Okay, very well in shaded areas. So if you have an area that you're trying to get something to grow that's green in the shade, fine fescue needs to be your grass of choice. Okay, what fine fescue does not tolerate is wear. Okay, so if you're going to tell me that you have a shaded area with a playground with swing sets and sliding boards and everything else, I'm going to recommend to you mulch because we're never going to get grass to grow in a shaded area that takes a lot of wear and tear. Okay, so it has its limitations, and that's exactly, we were talking about the park in the town that my office is in. That was exactly their trouble. The whole park. It's beautiful. It's got oak trees, that we can't even reach around, maple trees the size of a car, and it wouldn't let sunlight in to let the grass grow. But fine fescue will do really well in shaded areas. It is a little bit thatchy, similar to bluegrass, just by the nature of the way it grows. It grows by rhizomes as well. So you can see here the three grasses we've talked about: bluegrass in the bottom right, fine fescue in the upper right. So they look very similar. Again, it does very well in shaded areas, but it doesn't do well in sun. This is a parking lot that was planted in fine fescue, and you can see it just isn't performing the way the people thought it should perform. But again, wrong variety selection cost them money. Tall fescue grows very similar to perennial ryegrass in that you throw down one seed, one plant. Fine fescue, the one we just finished talking about, has those rhizomes like bluegrass, and it would eventually fill in that 2x2 square. Tall fescue has come a long way over the course of the last 10 years. And I'm going to skip through here. Most of you have probably seen tall fescue. This is the old K31 variety that was actually developed at Penn State. It was developed for a pasture grass. So it was intended to be thrown out for the cows to chew off and chew it down really low and really close to the surface, and then grow back. And that's what it's good at. But it's terrible on an athletic field because it's ugly. If I look out my front window, I have it all over my yard. And it's ugly as sin, but it tolerates wear really well. Okay, so but again, here's my point, and that is that tall fescues have come a long way over the course of the last 7 to 10 years. We have developed a lot of turf-type tall fescues that do especially well. I'm to the point in my career where instead of overseeding with perennial ryegrass, I'm starting to tell people in your kind of situations, parks and recs, where we don't have a small area that we're trying to, just one field that we're trying to maintain, and we don't have irrigation. We have limited capacity to mow extra times. I'm telling people to overseed, with tall fescue. The new turf type tall fescues. This is a 12-inch ruler over here on the right. That's a full 12-inch ruler, and you can see the roots of tall fescue, how deep they are. So it will do a lot of things for us, right? It'll do well in a drought time, not only because the roots are so deep, it'll do well because it can find water. It has a lot more area to absorb nutrients and utilize nutrients. Tall fescue is really a sleeper when it comes to managing athletic fields and turf areas. Find a good reputable seed dealer that has turf type tall fescues, and check them out. You can look on NTEP, which is the National Turfgrass Evaluation Program, ntep.org or .gov, I forget. But you just put in NTEP and do a search on it. And you can look at all the different characteristics of the new varieties of tall fescue. And I think you will be very, very happy and excited with your choice to go with tall fescue. Here is the old K31 on the right and the new turf type tall fescues on the left. Okay, much more appealing than is the old K31. My landlord, my wife and I just moved after 32 years in one place. We just moved, and our landlord, right before we moved into the place, decided he would make it look really pretty. And he went out and bought the absolute cheapest grass seed he could buy. And he bought K31 and he put it in the backyard. And it is ungodly. But if he would have spent another 25 cents a pound, he could have gotten something that looked a little bit nicer, like the grass on the left. So pay attention to that. The other cool season tolerable grass that I'll at least mention, and you probably have some of it somewhere on your facility, and that is Zoysia grass. The only trouble with Zoysia grass is it grows by stolons, above ground roots, basically big stems. But it is really a warm season grass. So in the heat of the summer, the heat of the nice weather in the middle of summer, it's beautiful, lush, and green. But this time of the year, it looks like it's all dead, and it will look that way until it starts to heat up, which will be much later in the year. And my final slide is, if you can't make grass grow, I would just encourage you to plant tomatoes in the whole yard, which is what this guy did. He just gave up, I think, and he just planted tomatoes in the whole yard. So with that, BK, that's what I have for you, or for the gang, minus all the questions that they are going to ask me, because we still have a few minutes left.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. That was great. One thing that I remember from the most recent STMA conference was people talking about blue muta, where they were taking combinations of the warm season grasses and overseeding with cooler season grasses. Have you seen much of that trying to happen here in Pennsylvania, maybe down in the southern parts, or in other states surrounding the area?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, the biggest challenge to blue muta, which is just a combination of bluegrass, it's a full stand of bluegrass and a full stand of Bermuda grass growing together in the same environment. The biggest challenge we're going to have in Pennsylvania is how winter tolerant the Bermuda grass is. So if you're in the Philadelphia over to Harrisburg, maybe up into Northampton, Lehigh County area, in that southeast corridor where it's a little bit warmer, I think that the new varieties of Bermuda are going to do well. You get out into my corner of the world, in Northwest Pennsylvania, we will put Bermuda grass to the test. If it can tolerate our winter, it is a cold tolerant variety. But we're doing research on it right now. Actually, Tanner Delval, my colleague in Berks and Schuylkill counties, is doing his PhD work on blue muta, wanting to see how winter tolerant it is, how well it performs with wear and tear. So he basically took Bermuda grass that was established and he interseeded bluegrass. He did that last fall. So we're excited to see what it's going to do. But I'll tell you where that has made a big hit is through the transition area out across from like St. Louis out to Kansas City, where it is hotter than snot and where it's cold as cold. Where they can do that in 2 times. My son spent 5 years on the grounds crew for the Kansas City Royals, and they would literally tear up their infield every year about mid-June and put down Bermuda grass. So he would manage Bermuda on the infield and bluegrass in the outfield. And then when the temperature started to swing again, they would literally come in, tear up the Bermuda and put bluegrass back down. So it's that is the true transition zone. And that's where those blue mutas and combinations are going to really see a purpose. And I think we're going to see a big benefit to them.
Yeah, I was seeing a lot of the early research coming out of like Oklahoma State and some of the areas that just north of Texas and things like that. So yeah, it must be that transition zone, as you're saying.
Yeah, the newest Bermuda grass that's out is Tahoma 31, and it is very cold tolerant. But it came from Oklahoma State, so I don't want to poo-poo it. But I will say that it was a grass developed at Oklahoma State, and they say it's cold tolerant. Is it cold tolerant for Erie County, Pennsylvania, or Cleveland, Ohio? So putting it out here, even down where I live in Butler County, is going to put it to the test for how cold tolerant it really is.
Folks, feel free to please jump in. Otherwise, I'll keep pulling on Jeff's ear here. But while we're waiting for some questions, how or what is the best way for folks to kind of do some outreach? Either they can reach out to you, but what are some other resources, maybe through Penn State Extension or other professional organizations out there that folks can look to for advice?
Yeah, well, certainly PRPS has done a great job with the Institute of utilizing some great resources. Thanks, Judy. CAFMO is certainly another organization that is sports specific. Okay, so it's sports turf specific, and we do an annual conference with CAFMO. We do an annual field day in a normal non-pandemic time. We do a summer field day. We do a conference. We do outreach. We're the sister chapter to the National STMA Association. They have some great resources on their website. The university that I work for, Penn State, has some wonderful resources. We're by far the largest turf program in the entire country. We're graduating about 35 students per year in the 4-year program, and other big universities like Ohio State, for example, they're graduating 3, maybe in a good year, they're graduating 3. So we are by far the largest, and we turn out a lot of people. So we have some great resources as well. You can reach out to me. My email is jtf2@psu.edu. My colleague is Tanner Del Val. And Tanner is on the eastern side of the state. And Tanner, oops. If you give me just a second, BK, I can tell you what Tanner's is, because we were going back and forth this morning. It's TLD. It's TCD 125 at psu.edu. And Tanner is my counterpart on the other side of the state, the eastern side. And we work very closely with the likes of the Dr. McNitts, the Dr. Landscoots, that are all based at the university. We talk to them on a regular basis. We do kind of the outreach for the long arm. We're the long arm of the College of Ag. But I will say that just because you're on the eastern side doesn't mean you can't call Jeff, and just because you're on the west side doesn't mean you can't get a hold of Tanner. We interchange. We actually do a podcast together for turf managers, and I would invite you to download that podcast. It's called Fresh Cut Grass, is the name of the podcast, and it's intended for. It's not a real highfalutin turf podcast like you see and hear a lot of. It's just like conversation like we just had at our level, and we bring in special guests from the Pirates. This week, for example, we have Bobby Piccolo from Derry Township in Harrisburg area is going to be our guest. So if they're regular people, and they're not professionals, turfgrass professionals. Certainly they are, but they're not a professional field all the time. They're on the level that all of you and I are on. So they're making the kind of decisions that you and I have to make every day.
And we just did host another event last month with CAFMO, actually, the CAFMO Conversations, which was a very similar format. It was more of a discussion and just kind of chat, but definitely with that professional feel. And we also invited George Toma, who, the
Jumpin' George.
So we heard quite a lot about the upcoming of how the industry has changed. Judy did have a really good question in there that we'll use as our finishing point here, that she did some soil tests a few months ago on one of her fields that needs lime, and the contractor basically said, ignore the test results. Why do you think a contractor would make that kind of advice?
Because it was going to cost him money. I don't know. Why would, that's like going to the doctor and the doctor putting you on an aspirin a day and you not doing it. Why did you even go to the doctor?
Judy, do you want to come off mute and maybe expand on your question?
Judy, I'd like to talk to this person, because if he specifically said to ignore the lime, why would you ignore it? That makes no sense. No sense whatsoever. So what you need to do is take that chart that I showed him, or that I showed you today, that when the pH is in the right optimum time, that's where the nutrients are most readily available. So you may not have to put down fertilizer if you get your pH raised to an acceptable level, because then more nutrients are available. That's where we're taking my analogy of the buffet is, that's where we're going in and we're taking the plastic lids off of the food. If we raise the pH, we're allowing those nutrients to be utilized by the plant, as opposed to keeping the lids on it. So it makes no sense. Why would you ignore? I went to the doctor, my family doctor, yesterday, and he took my blood pressure, and he said it was high. Why would he ignore that, right? He's going to do something about it. Well, if your pH is low, why wouldn't you do something about it? So
yeah, I guess it would matter what the pH was in the soil test to say whether or not you could ignore the lime.
If it says it needs lime, it needs lime. Why did he bother to waste the money to do a soil test if he wasn't going to pay attention to it, right? But Judy, we can talk about that later, because I'd like to get a hold of this contractor and ask him why. I mean, I could run him to the edge of getting ready to jump off the cliff, because why would he soil test if he wasn't gonna pay attention to the results?
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise with us. It's always enjoyable to have you chat with us, because you can put it in everyday terms, as opposed to trying to make us feel dumb. So I'd like to appreciate everyone else for taking the time to join us today. Please stay involved. Reach out to me. My email is bk@prps.org, and let us know what you think, how we're doing, and what advice do you need. Turf management is one issue along an entire spectrum of maintenance topics that everyone has. So if you have questions on infrastructure, if you have questions on other maintenance type needs or operation, or even training of your staff, let us know, reach out, and we'll help you find the answers that you need. So again, my name's BK, Director of the Pennsylvania Park Maintenance Institute. I want to thank Jeff Fowler for taking the time to join us today to educate us, and I look forward to hosting you all again in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.